now. Hello, welcome. I see Kaylee. Can we see you? Can you show us?
Hello.
Hi, we'd love to see your faces if you're open to it. You don't
All
have
right.
to.
No
No pressure. No pressure. Hi, I'm Erin. This is Fredericka. We're so glad you're here.
Hello, Erin. You are the art teacher, I take it?
Yes, for the middle school. Just began this year.
Hi, Lori.
And Fredericka is the artist.
Yes, we're so lucky. So
I want to
excited.
hear about water.
Oh, I've got a lot to say about it. I'm glad you're here. I
Thank
see
you.
you've got a marine painting on the wall right behind you.
Oh, yeah.
I have that's a tugboat scene on the Hudson River. How did you see it?
Oh, because
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was painted by my mother-in-law.
okay.
And we have some students here.
I see Kaylee.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing? Great to see
Okay.
you.
Good to see you.
Oh, glad you're here.
Good to be here.
We are recording, just so you know. I probably should have said that right off the bat, but so everyone knows. So I think we should get started here. Are you ready, Fredericka?
I am indeed.
Okay, well, I'm just really happy to see everybody tonight. Thanks for joining us on an evening and a weekday evening, making the time to be with us. And if you're Zooming all day already, a special double thanks for being on Zoom a little longer today. So Fredericka and I have been friends through work and spiritual communities and the art community for many years. And so when the Oakwood Friends School asked if I knew of any artists who would be appropriate to give talks, Fredericka was really top of my list. And I'm just really pleased and excited that she can be here with us today, because I think her message as an artist and environmentalist is something very inspiring for the kids. The fact that she's so sensitive to to how water interacts with our life, the visual beauty of water, and all of the difficult environmental issues which are occurring around water right now, and works to address all of these issues in her activism and in her art is just really inspiring to me. So I just want to say a little bit about Fredericka. She's an American painter, cultural activist, and educator, born and raised in Seattle, Washington. Her paintings of water actively engage the visual and kinesthetic senses, inviting contemplation through our relationship to water, its physicality and resonance in the body, its environmental and socioeconomic forces, psychological meaning, and transformative properties. Growing up surrounded by water and with a Sami great-grandmother, Foster has mythical reverence for water and water culture. As a cultural activist, through her painting and exhibition curating, Foster raises and sustains dialogue, transforming our understanding and misperceptions in relationship to the environment. Foster is the founder of thinkaboutwater.com, a water advocacy website that gathers cultural activists, features their work, and strengthens the cause together. Fredericka has exhibited internationally as well as locally, which she will be telling us about tonight, and her art has been reviewed in Art News, Tricycle Magazine, Columbia Daily Spectator, Highlands Current, Nautilus, Science Connected, Alternet, Huffington Post, and a number of other publications. So Fredericka graduated from the University of Washington with a BFA in 1972 and taught and studied at the Factory of Visual Arts in 1973, which was an alternative art school. So thank you, Fredericka. We are open to questions as we go along. Either raise your hand, you can use your hand reaction, or you can send a question in chat, or just ask out loud, I think, as we go along. That's fine, Fredericka, right?
That's fine.
Yeah, we're open to open dialogue and questions. And Fredericka, I will share screen with you now, so you can, you have co-host, so you can go ahead. Yeah, we're ready. Great.
Let me immediately put this into full screen. Oops. I do have one small correction to make. Oh, it's so crazy. These Zoom things always are where you don't want them when you need to get your pointer someplace. Excuse me.
Might be catching up a little bit.
Okay. I didn't get a BFA at the University of Washington.
Oh.
And it's got a BA, and then I went on to the factory, but ended up teaching there anyway. So I'm so happy to be talking to everybody on Earth Day, and thank you so much for showing up here. Earth Day is 50 years old today, and it sparked an environmental movement that today 1 billion people are gathering around the world to celebrate the Earth. And looking at this picture that was taken from the Apollo capsule, you really have to wonder why on earth they called Earth Earth instead of water. It's 70% water, but only 3% of that is fresh, which means that's available to us to keep and all of life on Earth. And 0.5% of that is actually usable by us. So people are gathering today in the hopes of changing our attitudes about the Earth and of changing policy at the local, global, international, every level, because we have to work at this. The amount of water that we have is finite. It came to us in a comet forever ago, and we're not going to get any more, at least in our lifetimes. I did hear somebody speculate about getting water from the moon if the moon had water and bringing it to us, but that's pretty far-fetched. It's much easier to conserve water, to reuse the water that we have, and that's what we need to aim for. So in the early 90s, I was working with spiritual symbols from different faiths. This was one inspired by Christianity. And this is a mezuzah. It's about 6 feet tall and deep enough to hold a scroll. But when I discovered that water was common to every faith, I really came home to my subject matter. And I lived in Seattle, Washington, on and in water my entire life. I fell in love with these very polluted urban waters because of the way they took reflections, which is this is Fisherman's Wharf, and the one I showed you before was Lake Union. So once I started painting water, I got very focused on thinking about oil paints and what they could do. And I started using a lot of complementary colors. Those are the colors across from each other on the color wheel. So you've got purple and yellow, orange and red, blue, green and red, orange and blue. And as I worked, you can imagine it was a lot easier for me to get a gallery doing images of water than doing images of spiritual subject matter. Although to me, they were very much grounded in the sense of awe that we have looking at nature and particularly looking at water. And these are several shows at the Fishback Gallery, which put me on an exclusive with them. Unfortunately, they closed in 2013. Well, I was also a photographer, and as I would be in a kayak or on the beach taking pictures of water, I became very aware of these creatures and forms that live in the water. And I noticed that the Indian people, the native First Nation people who had lived, the Salish Coast peoples who had lived on these waters, had these same ovoids that I saw in the water. And I realized water wasn't just communicating with me, it had been communicating with people who looked at it forever. So this is the painting that I made from that photograph. And oops, excuse me, I went the wrong direction. The reason this looks so different from the photograph is because I have right-left dyslexia. And what I thought was one of my most difficult characteristics turned out to be something that allowed me to see differently than other people, so that it was the gift I had to give. The palette of this, I'm not tied to the palettes of my photographs at all. I'm busy stealing from other artists. I've stolen from Monet, Vermeer, you name it, I've stolen. And this particular palette, I had no idea why I was using these colors. And then when it was hanging on the wall in the gallery, I realized I'd been listening to the radio talking about the Iraq War throughout the entire painting, and I had accidentally done camouflage. So that painting's now living in London. Anyway, I had this theory in my head now that water communicated with artists. And when I went to Norway, this is in the fjords, and again, the thick water I love, but this, thank heaven, is not because it's polluted, it's because it's filled with glacial silt. So the light still doesn't go down. And this is Munch, Edvard Munch. And as you see, look at these forms back here. He also was influenced by what he saw in the water. This is also in Norway. And artists really have to follow their creative noses. They have to follow their curiosity wherever it leads them. As all of us who work on iPads, et cetera, know, click, click, click. But there's something really different when you take a pen and pencil in your hand, when you stand in front of something, then you bring in motion, you bring in touch, and that changes the way it affects the brain. For example, this piece is 9 feet high. So when you're standing in front of this piece, it is an entirely different feeling than looking at it on a little screen. You can feel the water. Also, water is very meditative and is used often to describe emotion. We can connect through water. People go and sit by water in order to get that sense of connection with other living things. So this is the Cathedral St. John the Divine in New York City, and it's the largest Gothic cathedral in the entire world. It is enormous. This is a map of the cathedral. Lisa Schubert from the cathedral came to an exhibit I was having in 2009 and asked me if I would get involved in a project to fill the cathedral with images of water. I said, sure. I ended up being the guest curator. and we put in 200 pieces by 40 artists all over the cathedral. And then here is an example. This is Bill Viola, his Ascension. We had 2 pieces of his. The way I chose things for the cathedral is I would lean against the walls and close my eyes and say, what do you want here? And then I'd open my eyes and I would see one of the images that I had been collecting. This is Tide Table by William Kentridge. This is an animated drawing, which is great fun. This is done with charcoal. He would do a drawing, erase, photograph, redo the next frame, photograph, erase, go through the process over and over, making an animated drawing. We also had installation. This is Water Bowl Installation by Victoria Vesna. And then we also ran a DVD throughout the entire exhibit that included other artists who had used water imagery. And this one is by Erin. We have 2 of her pieces. Erin, would you like to say something about these pieces?
Sure, thank you. This was a photograph of a pond right at the shallow end at a place where I go on retreat. So I just feel it was an example of I was on retreat and my mind was very open, my eyes were very open, and something very small and ordinary just seemed so special, and I managed to grab it, you know. So that was this one. And I think there's another one, right?
That's right here.
So yeah, this is a painting, a watercolor painting. It's about 3 by 4 feet, and it's titled Balloons. And for me, it's kind of evocative of bodies as vessels that we move through life. As you could compare it to being in a vessel on a river or a balloon, fragile, and in motion, and in this sense gathering, like, you know, things are gathering together. It's not a very clear definition for the painting, but those were the ideas.
Well, as this exhibit was running, many people talked about how they felt more connected to water after seeing this exhibit. But what really convinced me that art could have an effect on social policy was the things that went along with the exhibition. And here is Food and Water Watch showed up and did a program on fracking, which is, of course, hydraulic fracturing, where you drill down, say, a mile through the aquifer, beneath the aquifer, and then you horizontally push millions of gallons of water, which now you have added chemicals that are very poisonous but are slippery, so that they allow the water to be slippery. And you bring in sand, and as you go horizontal, you break apart slate, and that releases natural gas. And this has given us a tremendous freedom to have our own natural gas here in America. Fracking was just huge. The environmental costs also turned out to be absolutely huge. And New York, who saw what was happening in Pennsylvania, which was really awful, decided that they did not want any fracking in New York. And what happened in the cathedral was very interesting. There were 40 tables set up behind the 2,000 people who showed up that had their information. They were all freshwater advocates. Those people were exchanging cards with each other. The cathedral was willing to be an umbrella for this. And so the voice got amplified so far beyond what it had been before. And I think it did help. So this was a one-person show I did at the Beacon Institute of Rivers and Estuaries. this was a place that is associated with Clarkson University, and that I was so happy to be there because they invented something that could measure pollution in real time in the Hudson River, which meant that you could suddenly hold people accountable for what they were dumping into the river. It's made a big difference. Then I got invited by an organization called SAGE BioNetwork, a group of scientists dedicated to open platforms. And I went to speak about my work to them. I was at an assembly of 250 scientists where I thought of myself as the sorbet course. I quickly showed my work. I gave them all think about water bottles. And just at the time this was happening, we had the most massive sewage spill in Seattle. What is happening here, and in lots and lots of other places, I'm sorry to say, is that as the climate warms and the air holds more moisture and we get more rain, we get more runoff and we pave over things, right? Because we're growing our population. So as we pave things over, there's no place for the water to go, and the rain pours into the sewage system and overwhelms the sewage system, which then starts spewing out this horrible stuff. So a group of artists and I did a program with a subset of these scientists where the artists put on lab coats, and we told them that they were using polluted water to paint these squares, which were all about their experience with water. And as you see, they really got carried away. They did the most wonderful little drawings. They were not at all intimidated to draw. And they didn't care about the hazardous materials at all. They just went for it. So this, just to give you an idea of how horrific this is a picture that I took a couple months ago. We had a much smaller sewage spill in Seattle. This is the algae bloom that we got from that. And as I walked along this path and took this photograph, as we left, we saw a sign saying, "This algae is poisonous. You do not breathe," right? Yeah, okay, so at the end of the session at Sage BioNetworks, the scientists made posters, and this is one of the posters that they made. "We're drinking dinosaur pee. We only have the amount of water that got dumped by that comet." I think there were more than one. And the water we're using now is the water that has been used forever. And the dinosaurs, of course, were part of the hydrological cycle, peeing into the water, which went into the aquifer, were the same. So every single thing that comes into our bodies, everything that comes out of our bodies, it matters. It matters a lot. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Drawdown, I love this book so much because it's full of solutions that exist right now. And the project has enlarged. It now is online, Climate Solutions 101. And it's 6 short videos. I'm not sure how long they are. I haven't watched them yet. I shouldn't say short, about solutions. Another Sage BioNetwork assembly was about algorithms, and I just made this postcard for that event. I learned about algorithms and how it is influencing our lives. They are used by computers, and now they're used by everything. It's a set of rules to be followed in calculations to give you a certain outcome, like, can I buy a house? This is other people looking at me. What kind of data is collected on me? Can I buy a house? Can I get that job? All these things are determined by numbers that people are following to come up with these solutions. So the rules that I made were consider all the citizens in the Salish Sea and always think about water. But if you Google algorithms and racism and poverty, you will come up with pages of studies that have been done. The problem with algorithms is we make them. So we all have our unconscious ideas and make assumptions that aren't necessarily meant to be racist. Like in healthcare, it turned out to be a huge problem. They thought that people who spent less on medicine were less sick. Well, that turned out not to be the case, but it meant that people who were Black and Hispanic didn't have the same access at the insurance companies to the care that they would have given somebody who had spent more on healthcare. That's just an example. They're madly fixing these things as much as they can, but algorithms are a big problem. So I went to teach at the Seattle Artists League, and I wanted to teach a class in art and activism, I decided. And the class decided to do a book celebrating what we loved about the sea and being filled with things that were solution oriented. Well, while we were doing this, this is Tahlequah, J35 in the southern killer whale resident population. She had a 400-pound calf, the first live birth in 4 years. The calf lived a half an hour. Then she pushed her calf over 1,000 miles to show all of us what was happening. The calf would fall down into the water. She would dive down, pick it up. She was followed by a cortege of whales, a funeral procession. And the international community picked up on this. A lot of noise was made. People suddenly got it, that the problem was they were starving to death. These whales have a different culture than the other killer whales. The other killer whales eat seal. These whales eat salmon, particularly Chinook salmon. Now here you see the salmon. The female has laid her eggs. The male is spawning right now. He's fertilizing the eggs. Then they're going to lay down and die. And when the eggs hatch and all these thousands of fry come out, they're going to eat their parents. They're then going to leave that stream and they're going to swim to the sound. They're going to swim to salt water, to the ocean. They're going to spend their whole life in the ocean. And then they're going to come back upstream into the creeks and the streams, rivers. The wonderful thing is they're going to bring all these minerals to the forests, to the animals, to a whole chain of life that desperately needs those minerals. But what we did is we decided we needed a lot of dams, so we built them. They can't get up through the dams. We keep trying to make ways for them to get up. It just simply isn't working. We built all these tubes to put water in, all these big pipes to put the streams in. They can't get through those streams. So what's happening now is they can't get to their place where they must lay their eggs to survive. We're going to have to bring down some of those dams and getting public. The Elwha Dam has come down. The Native Americans have made that happen. The First Nation peoples are all over this. We need to get rid of the dams, and there's a lot of agreement growing now to do it, but change takes time, and none of us know if these whales are going to have time to survive. There's only 74 of them, 75 now, 95 2 decades ago. So on to Columbus, Ohio with Gianna Perez Gonzalez. And we did a water journeys section with art professors where we had them draw maps of their individual water journeys. And it turned out to be such a fantastic way for people to get to know each other. Everybody has their memories of water, whether they had it, whether they didn't have it, where they lived, their favorite lake. It's a wonderful way for artists to get to know each other. Back to the cathedral, I continued exhibiting there at showing that. And this one is called The Value of Sanctuary. One of the, yes, somebody have a question? One of the videos that I watched that was most distressing was a boat of Turkish sailors that were there for the protection of the people who were on the rafts trying to get across the Mediterranean, watching a raft collapse and people sink beneath the waters, and nothing was done. I didn't want to paint bodies in the water. I just felt that was way too gruesome. So I picked clothing. And then they also asked at the cathedral if they could have the whale painting, because of course the whales were also seeking sanctuary, and it was actually in the paper quite a bit at that time. And just to show you the enormous scale of this cathedral, this is in a bay, and now you have to take the image you're looking at and double it to get up to the ceiling, even more than double it. It's absolutely enormous. So one of the wonderful things you get to do as an artist is collaborate with artists from other disciplines. And Philip, the composer Philip Glass, is someone who I admire enormously, and I listen to his music frequently when I work. That conversation at Nautilus sparked for me a huge amount of experimentation. Philip was talking in an ongoing conversation that we were having about how he created change in his work. And one way he did it was to change something out. And I realized, since I work all by myself, what I could change out was materials. So for this particular group of paintings, I used Yupo paper, super slippery, not at all like oil on canvas, but it did affect my practice. And this I mirrored because I started writing down my dreams. Philip and I had a long conversation about dreams. And mirroring came up. I realized I was starting to work more and more and more out of my unconscious mind. And of course, this is very symmetrical because this is a photograph that I just flipped. This is about 200 miles from the Arctic North Pole. This was 200 nautical miles from the North Pole. And it's light all the time. And the light is so incredible. And this is the painting I made from this. And of course, this isn't symmetrical because I can't do that. I just can't. I'm working here and then I'm working there, and I'm not able to do an exact mirror because of that right-left thing I told you about. Well, the artist's life is filled with coincidences. It's absolutely the serendipity that comes into your life when you are in your creative space is very magical. And right about this time, I was one of 6 women chosen to fill a building that was being built in Brooklyn. And this is the Pierpont building. And they wanted mirrors of these prints that I'd been working on. And then they picked that painting as a lobby piece. So this is another one of the mirrors. But I started thinking, as I'm putting this series together, I've got all these beautiful, beautiful photographs that I've taken. I want to mirror these. So I did. They weren't interested in those. But for me, I had created a space where water and I could have a conversation. And I realized I didn't want to continue thinking about water. I wanted to start thinking as water. I'm not sure exactly what that means. I'll let you know. This is a photograph that is 18 inches high by 48 inches long and was recently in an exhibition called Eco Consciousness. And what I love about this is the sense of rebirth that this image gives me. I think it's a really exciting image. So COVID hits, and all the things that I and everyone else had planned just went away. And I really, really missed my artist friends. And my husband and I were in complete isolation. And I had this website called Think About Water that just fed into my website. That's all. And I thought, I'm going to open this up to some of the artists that have been working with water, who I always go to their shows. I love what they do. I want to continue the conversation. And then we settled up with about, I think we have around 28 people now, and we're going to stop in the early 30s because we like staying small to really support each other and do projects. So one of the first ones we did was Trump was gutting the Clean Water Act, and several of us made postcards of our work, all with the same messages that got sent out. They looked exactly the same, except the art was different, to try to get, and we sent them to legislatures. And then we decided to have an exhibition, and that was curated by one of our members, Doug Fogelson, and that was put up in a virtual gallery. I put the tape of the opening in the chat, and you can actually see the virtual exhibit at www.thinkaboutwater.com, and it just pops up. And it's really interesting. At the opening, all the artists talked about their work for a minute, except unfortunately the first 4 artists didn't get to because we forgot to push record. So I had to go back in and speak for them. They were much better. And everybody spoke for 1 minute. So it goes very quickly. All of these artists are incredibly dedicated to water and do amazing creative things. And what was so surprising to me is we didn't have any duplication. Somebody would be making an island that would be for birds. Somebody else would be doing a performance at one of the parks on the East River. Everybody had their own thing. This is the painting that I put in. I've done several paintings of the River Thames, and the River Thames suffers 50 to 60 sewage spills a year, and that has been going on for quite a long time. They plan to fix it in the next few years. In the meantime, it's unthinkable how polluted that river is, but it takes the most interesting reflections. And the reason I particularly love this composition is I feel this one figure is kind of making a clarion call saying, help me, help me, help me. So another thing in Think About Water in working together, Basia Erland does these incredible seeded ice books that she puts all over the world. And she invited all of us to participate in an exhibition that is coming up. So I made an ice book for Puget Sound, for the Salish Sea, to acknowledge the people who lived here long before I did, that had oysters and kelp in it, because both of those things we need lots more of. So yesterday morning I woke up and they said, we have 90 forest fires in Washington already. I started this painting two or 3 years ago. The world outside the window was red. The sun was red. The water was red. And this is called firewater. I actually found a photograph at this time of a place where the water had caught on fire from things that were in the water. These fires that are happening on the West Coast are absolutely devastating. And this is COVID. This is the drowning of the COVID. It feeds back into a project I did a million years ago on transforming the HIV protease into something harmless from the horrible thing that it was. And there was an exhibit about that. And now I've circled back around with COVID, and I've done a few of these COVID paintings. Anything I think about, I managed to find a way to do a water painting about it. So I just want to thank you all so much for your attention. And of course, as water activists march, and now that I'm vaccinated, I'll be back on the street with my signs. And thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. Any questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, what happened? Whoops, how did I get to that? Excuse me. Can you stop me sharing? I seem to have lost. Oh, wait a minute. I just have to exit.
It's not sharing screen now.
Okay, it's not now?
No.
Oh, good.
I was pleased that you brought up symmetry, because I know that our students who are here, Kaylee and David, have been asked to think about symmetry, and we know how hard it can be, what a useful tool it can be for drawing using symmetry, but it can also be so hard for our young students. That's one of the skill building things we've been doing. And David, are you there, David? I want to put him on the spot.
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you happen to have your totem pole with you?
No, I don't have it with me right now.
I thought Fredericka would like to see that. We made our own totem poles from the North American native tradition. And so I thought the students would enjoy seeing your connection to that area.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen that.
Yeah.
This is Fred. Fredericka, I'd be interested in anything you might have to say about water and spirituality. How water relates to or embodies or represents the spiritual life of human people.
It's fascinating to me that every single faith has water in it. You have the ritual of baptism. You have, in fact, the first word in Arabic is water. And the fountains that are built in and around all the mosques, you have in the Jewish faith, water is incredibly important. You have the mikveh. Every faith has water in it. And even Buddhism, Suzuki said, if you want to understand your mind, study water, and you will understand your mind. Because he noticed that thoughts just flowed, just moved. And when you meditate, we are told to be like water. And of course, when the earth was created, you look at the role of water in the Bible, from the very beginning to the flood, and its critical importance. And I think that the reason that we are so connected to it is because we are water. I don't know if I already said this, but 75% of our body is water, 98% of our eyes are water. Every living thing needs water to exist. And since we've all breathed the same air, we've all drunk the same water, that is something that we know in our DNA. We know that water connects us. So when we go and we sit by a stream or by the sea, I think the reason we have such a common experience as human beings or as animals of going, is because we are water, and water is life. That understanding is something that is in our hearts. So I think water and spirit are like this. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Michael.
You know, in looking through the slides and the work that you did before, and then the work that you did and these you embarked upon when you started thinking about water and painting that, there seems to be like this amazing shift in control of color and use of color. Not necessarily, you know, definitely shape. I mean, this beautiful shapes that you're able to make, but what is your relationship to color in terms of your paintings and especially the paintings of water?
Okay, so thank you, Michael. Color was very hit and miss for me before I started doing the water paintings. And there were two things that drove my focus. One was need. Once I started exhibiting with Fishback, he wanted me there every 2-3 years, right? And I'm a slow painter. I paint in layers of glazes. And, you know, I'll put an opaque one in now and then I'll add glazes, and then I'll take them out. I go through layer after layer after layer. So I had to come up with a color scheme. And there was a guy, Michael Wilcox, that did a book called The School of Color that I found enormously helpful. Most of, because of the way he had laid it out, his thinking about it and the charts and all of the ways that you mixed color, it was just enormously helpful to me. So I would go and look at paintings that I loved, like say a Vermeer, and I would take a little color chart with me and I'd see what colors those were. And then I'd figure out how to mix them. And with water, and then I would find Whistler. You know, Whistler said, "You shall know the painter by his grays." And of course he said his. But colored grays are what make water, and the colored grays come out of these beautiful complementary colors. So that's what happened. I got so involved. Each painting, I would set a new color problem for myself. As I said, by stealing somebody else's palette. How did Monet do that? How did he get those colors? How many of them do I want to use? And I started limiting my palette. So I would have two. I'd have a warm yellow and a cold yellow, a blue that tended towards red and a blue that tended towards green, et cetera, et cetera. So as you go around the color wheel, and I had so many less choices to make, I got better. But Nancy Haynes, who is a painter I adore, I love her work, just did a little video clip, auditory really, where she talked about her palette, and she had 56 colors. with names like Baroque Orange. It was just mind-boggling to me. And I went out and bought some extra colors, and now I have no idea what to do with them because they shift everything, some of these colors. So, but I'll learn something new about it. So I'm not feeling as limited right now. Nancy inspired me with that list. It was just this music to my mind and my ears looking at those colors. That's a long answer to that question. I love color. I just love it.
So if there's any questions, maybe now is a good time to pipe up. We would love your questions. I think otherwise, I just want to thank you so much, Fredericka.
Thank you. I'm going to take a little screenshot here of this screen.
Yeah.
You people who
So
can.
what's the screenshot commands
Oh,
again?
it's Shift Command 4.
That's right. I did it too. Yeah, it's really a pleasure to get to spend the time with you and hear more in detail about what you're doing and how you're thinking. And it's inspiring how you connect your art to benefit others through the environment and your understanding of water. And it's such a simple thing, you know, water, and easy as are things right in front of us to take advantage of. And you remind us that we shouldn't and need it and depend on it. And that's the way it is. And it's right that we remember that. So I'm going to send your links, as I said, to the community, and hopefully we can start thinking. Oh, did we want to ask, do we know where the Oakwood Friends water comes from? Does anybody know?
Does everybody know where their watershed is? Mine's Cedar River in Seattle and Catskills in New York.
Do we know? So I have a
Good thing to
project.
find out, guys. Find out where your watershed is and start following what's happening to that watershed in the news, so that when they start making moves on your watershed, you can be ready for that, because it's really important that we protect those watersheds. That's our water that we drink, bathe, everything. We got to take care of it. And that message isn't always clear, you know. Sometimes other people want that water.
I have a question.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, Fredericka. Well, I was just curious. I was looking at water filter, pictures recently online, and I'm just curious what your protocol is for your drinking water in your different, I know you live in a couple places, but like, what is the best way to do?
You know, I know
besides
a lot.
besides buying the plastic, bottles of water.
Yeah, I don't buy plastic bottles of water ever, unless it's critically necessary. I carry my own bottle and I refill it. And at home I use a Brita filter. I know people who use osmosis filters, many different kinds of filters. And I guess if I were young, I would definitely think about that, because just to stay as healthy as I could for as long as I could, I would filter my water very carefully. Certainly in New York, the Catskill water is still pretty clean, although we did have some kind of an infection several years ago. And in Seattle, I smell the chlorine when I drink the water in Seattle, and occasionally I can smell chlorine, particularly around these sewage spills. It's quite awful. I mean, we need it. I'm glad it's there, but the filter seems to remove the chlorine taste. So I think that helps. So that's not much of an answer. I think it really depends on where you live. I mean, the people in Flint, Michigan can't drink their water. Um, my friend Emily Harris's parents can't drink their water in Minnesota. I know people in Bucks County who cannot drink their water. Companies send them bottled water because they destroyed their source of drinking water with pollution. And now they're trying to, they just give the people water now because they have to. So it really depends on where you live. I think we all have to check our water. I really think it's necessary, unfortunately. We seem to have lost the agreement. Well, I don't know. Did we ever have that agreement that we were going to always have clean water? It was okay for a little while. We started cleaning things up. That day will come again. I'm convinced of it. I have great hopes. I think that the students you're teaching are going to be the leaders of tomorrow, and they understand what's happening much better than the rest of us do because it affects them more. They're all over it. So people like Greta is my greatest heroine. I just think she's the most astonishing woman. But that whole generation, this entire generation, I think is going to change the world. And I hope the rest of us are able to help them. So I want to. Anyway, thank you for coming.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I was just wondering what you think, like, personally and I suppose spiritually about like the connection between water like directly on the ground and like rain coming from the sky, like how like the spiritual differences between the two are, I suppose.
That's a wonderful question. When I think about it, that water that comes out of the sky and then seeps into the ground, it's getting purified as it goes through the ground. The water is always pure, but it picks up other things, right? But the water stays pure always. And then as it comes down, all the stuff that's in it filters through the earth and gets all cleaned up to go into the aquifer to come back to us as pure water. But when you think about it, it's not that the water became impure, it's just that it gathered up all this other stuff on its path. And then when it evaporates, again, it leaves behind all this stuff, right? And that stays down there, and the pure water goes up into the air to come back down on us again. And a lot of that, when there's pollution in the atmosphere, that gets, again, picked up. But the water is always pure in my mind. I see it as absolutely pure and beautiful, all the water, and that it's just a matter of how much it's carrying. So I like it. To me, it's very spiritual at every single level. What do you think?
I mean, I guess I agree with you. I personally am really into rain. I like the rain a lot, on many levels, like watching it, listening to it, standing in it. So I think I agree with you about the purity of water in all forms. Thinking about it now, I think that water definitely is a really special thing from multiple perspectives in the world. So, yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. And I have a place for you to live. Seattle. We have rain. So somebody who likes rain, this is your place. You will absolutely be happy. And in the summer, it's the most gorgeous place on earth. And for people who like rain, it's perfect. So I hope you'll come out to Seattle sometime. Thank you so much, Erin. And I want to thank the Oakwood School for having me. I really appreciated it. This was lots of fun. Thanks.
It really was fun. Thank you so much, Fredericka. I have the recording, so I will send it to you. And okay, well, I guess we're all set then. I guess we'll say good night.
Good
Night,
night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you
Thanks
so much. Thank you.
Bye.
for coming.
I
Bye.
have to turn off the recording.